My family called me worthless until the commander-in-chief said my name. I woke up to the sound of a heart monitor beeping beside me. The hospital ceiling above was too white, too sterile, like it was trying to erase what happened. A searing pain shot through my shoulder the moment I tried to sit up. And then I saw him standing in the doorway behind a nurse. Small, brown curls, wide eyes. It hit me like a second bullet. Leo, my nephew. The boy I hadn't seen in 4 years. The boy I took a bullet for, without even knowing he was family. They disowned me for becoming a cop. But in one moment, one bullet, one choice, I saved the very thing they loved most. My name is Isabel Ruiz, 29 years old. I'm a street cop, a responder, a woman with a badge, a gun, and a spine forged in rejection. My family, doctors, lawyers, Ivy League legacies. The Ruiz name came with prestige and expectation, just not for blue uniforms and badge numbers. I was the first to break that mold, the first to be labeled a disgrace. You'll throw your life away chasing chaos. My father said the night I told him I was enrolling in the academy. Cops are for people who couldn't make it elsewhere. My mother added. They cut me off that day. No calls, no visits, no birthday cards. My nephew Leo was just a baby when I last held him. I still remember walking out of the house with just a backpack and a dream. No tearful goodbyes, no hugs, just silence. I became a cop anyway. Graduated top 3 in my class. Took the midnight shifts, the hard neighborhoods, the calls no one wanted, and I never looked back. Until that one day, a call came, an armed robbery in progress. Possible hostage situation. I didn't know the victim. I didn't know the address. I didn't know the child inside was Leo. All I knew was that a boy needed saving. The bullet tore through my shoulder as I shielded him. Pain came later. Right then. There was only instinct. Cameras caught it. News headlines called me a hero. The mayor made a statement. The White House called. And suddenly, the daughter they'd erased was standing next to the President of the United States. He looked me in the eye, shook my hand, and said, "You didn't just save a child. You saved a family." I didn't have the heart to tell him. That family had thrown me away years ago. But this story isn't just about glory. It's about grief. It's about the people who never believed in you until the world forced them to. If you've ever felt cast out, if your choices made you unlovable, if you've ever had to earn your worth the hard way, then my story is yours too. Because sometimes, the loudest revenge is not the scream, it's the silence when they realize you were everything they never saw. Follow for the full story. This is just the beginning. Part 2 will take you into my childhood, the polished lies behind our perfect family. Don't miss it. Subscribe now to hear the full journey from exile to honor. We looked perfect. From the outside, the Ruiz family was untouchable. Dad was a criminal law professor at Stanford. Mom ran a pediatric practice with a waitlist 6 months long. And my older sister Marissa, she was the golden girl, perfect GPA, married a Harvard-educated architect, and gave birth to the first grandson. That grandson was Leo. We were the kind of family that people invited to galas and charity fundraisers. The kind whose Christmas cards came printed on glossy paper with coordinated outfits and inspirational Bible quotes. But behind the curated smiles and expensive wine, there were rules. And rule number 1, don't be the one who embarrasses the family. From as early as I can remember, I felt like a visitor in my own home. My room had ballet trophies I didn't want, SAT prep books I never asked for, college brochures from Yale and Princeton spread out on my desk before I even hit puberty. I wasn't born rebellious, but I was born different. I asked too many questions. I wanted to join the junior firefighting program in 9th grade. They said no. I asked to shadow a female detective once. They laughed. Policing is beneath you, my dad said. You can be more. My mom added, why waste your brain chasing criminals? The truth was, I didn't want to chase criminals. I wanted to protect people, to show up when no one else could. But those weren't values they admired. In our home, prestige mattered more than purpose. When Marissa got her residency in pediatric oncology, they threw a garden party. When I told them I was accepted into the police academy, they didn't even speak. My father stared at his coffee mug for a full minute before saying, "You're making the biggest mistake of your life." My mother didn't cry. She just got up from the table. Not in anger, but disappointment, the kind that erases you. I moved out that week. No suitcase, just a duffel bag, and a backpack full of class notes and police academy forms. No goodbye from Marissa, no photo of Leo to take with me. Just a door that clicked shut behind me like a verdict being handed down. In that moment, I became an outsider to the very people who raised me. But the academy, it gave me something I never had at home: clarity. It didn't matter that I was the only Latina in my class, or that I showed up with no support system. What mattered was grit, performance, instinct. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was disappointing anyone. I felt like I was becoming someone. My roommate, Officer Danny Harper, became my chosen sister. We trained until our muscles burned and our lungs gave out. We carried each other through obstacle courses, through tear gas drills, through nights of doubt. She once told me, "Family is who bleeds beside you, not who smiles in your Christmas card." I didn't know then how true those words would become. When I graduated, no one from my family came. No proud parents in the crowd. No photos. No flowers. Not even a message. I stood alone in my dress blues, staring at a sea of families embracing their graduates, while I quietly adjusted my badge and walked off stage by myself. I won't lie, it stung, but I wore that pain like armor. Because when you grow up in a house of silence, you learn how to be loud, even when you're alone. That was the last time I thought about my family in any real way, until the day a dispatch call sent me racing to a hostage situation. And fate made sure the boy I'd take a bullet for was the one they loved most. It was a slow Thursday, the kind where the most dramatic thing you expect is a neighbor's cat stuck in a tree or a speeding ticket complaint from someone driving a Tesla. I was halfway through my shift, sipping stale gas station coffee, when the radio call came in. Possible active shooter, Millwood Market. Shots fired. Officers respond code 3. My heart dropped. Millwood Market. That was in one of the wealthier neighborhoods, suburban. Quiet. Not the place you'd expect chaos. But the dispatcher's voice had a crackle of urgency, and there's a tone, a shift, that tells you this isn't a drill. I hit the lights. The siren screamed, and I felt my entire body switch to instinct. As we raced through traffic, I kept going over scenarios in my head. How many shooters? Are there hostages? Is backup already there? Denny, my partner, was focused, both hands on the wheel, eyes locked on the road. I checked my gear, vest, cuffs, Glock, trauma kit. It felt like a blur, and yet every second was burned into my memory. We pulled up 3 minutes later. Chaos had already set in. A woman covered in blood ran from the entrance, sobbing. Someone was screaming. Shattered glass littered the sidewalk. And then I heard it. A child's voice, high-pitched, terrified, crying out from inside. Danny looked at me. No words were needed. We moved. Inside the store was hell. Shelves overturned. A security guard slumped behind the counter, bleeding but breathing. Customers hiding behind freezers. And in the far aisle, next to the cereal boxes, I saw the shooter, tall, gaunt, unstable, with a rifle shaking in his grip. And beside him, a boy, no older than 7, face pale, knees scraped, tears streaking through dirt on his cheeks. My heart stopped. I knew that face. I hadn't seen him in years, but it was him. Leo, my nephew. I froze for just half a second, that dangerous moment where shock and reality collide. I hadn't even known Marissa still lived nearby. Hadn't known Leo was in the city. Hadn't imagined our paths would cross like this, not through blood, not through bullets. But there he was, my sister's son, the child I used to hold as a baby, now crying in the grip of a madman. Time snapped back. I took cover behind an end cap, radioed in the position. Danny moved to flank from the left. The shooter was ranting incoherent words. Paranoia. Something about conspiracies and government tracking chips. He wasn't targeting Leo. He was using him, a shield, a pawn. My training kicked in, but something deeper did, too. I didn't care that I hadn't been invited to his birthday parties. Didn't care that my name had probably been scrubbed from family stories. What I cared about was this: Leo was in danger, and I was the only one standing between him and a bullet. Danny whispered through her radio, "I've got a shot if he moves." But that wasn't enough for me. I needed to get closer. Every step forward felt like a lifetime. I edged around the cereal aisle, slow, steady, until I had eyes on both of them. I spoke low. "Hey, you don't want to do this?" The man flinched. Leo looked up, and I saw it in his eyes. Recognition. Even after all these years. "Aunt Izzy," he whispered. It almost broke me. The shooter raised the gun, and I made a choice. I lunged. I don't remember the sound of the shot, just the impact. A white-hot fire in my side. The air knocked out of me. The world tilting. But I saw Leo run. I saw Danny tackle the shooter. I saw backup swarm in seconds later, and as I collapsed, bleeding out beside a box of Cheerios, I remember thinking one thing: if this is the end, I'm glad I finally did something that mattered. But it wasn't the end. Not even close. It was only the beginning of a story that would break headlines, summon the president, and finally force my family to see me, really see me. I woke up in a hospital bed. White ceiling, beeping machines, a dull ache that pulsed with my every breath, and pain sharp, throbbing, pulsing from my side where the bullet had torn through. I wasn't dead, which felt like a miracle. The first face I saw was Danny, sitting beside me, dark circles under her eyes and a forced grin that broke into a real one. The second I blinked, "You're awake," she said. "Jesus, Izzy, you scared the hell out of us." The room filled slowly, fellow officers, nurses, people I'd barely worked with dropping off flowers, notes, energy drinks. Apparently, I was the cop who took a bullet for a kid. But not just any kid. A kid people had seen on video. Danny held up her phone and showed me the footage. Someone, maybe a shopper, maybe a security camera, had captured everything. From the moment I stepped into the aisle, to the instant Leo called out my name, to the split second when I lunged and the shot rang out. And the most painful part, the sound of Leo screaming, "Aunt Izzy," as I hit the floor. The video was everywhere. News outlets, social media, international coverage, hashtags with my name, memes, edits with dramatic music. Even military veterans were commenting things like, "That's what courage looks like." I should have felt proud. Instead, I felt exposed. Because now, they'd all know, including the people who had spent years pretending I didn't exist. 3 days later, I was sitting in a wheelchair in the hospital garden, sunlight on my face, trying to eat something that resembled Jell-O, when my phone rang. Private number. I almost ignored it, but something told me to answer. "Sergeant Isabel Ruiz." "Speaking," I said cautiously. "This is Captain Angela Reynolds from the Office of Presidential Protocol. The President would like to formally recognize your actions during the Millwood Market incident." I froze. I'm sorry. "You've been nominated for the Public Safety Medal of Valor. There will be a ceremony at the White House. Full honors. The President will present it himself." I didn't even know what to say. That night, as I sat alone staring out the hospital window, my mind kept circling back to one thing. Not the medal, not the headlines, not even the President. Leo, his face, his voice, and what it all meant now. I hadn't seen him since he was 5, and yet, when it mattered most, when his life was on the line, I was the one who showed up. Not because I wanted redemption, not because I needed forgiveness, but because that's what you do when someone you love is in danger, even if they've forgotten how much you love them. The next morning, the hospital receptionist knocked gently on my door. "There's a visitor," she said. "Family." I blinked. "Who?" "A little boy." "And a woman," he insisted. My heart skipped. Marissa stood there awkwardly, older than I remembered, eyes tired, lips tight. She held Leo's hand. He clutched a small stuffed dinosaur, clearly nervous. Neither of them spoke, so I did. "Hey, Leo." He stepped forward, and without a word, hugged me, tight, small arms around my waist, face buried in the folds of my hospital gown. I cried, silently, but I cried. Marissa looked like she wanted to say something. Maybe thank you. Maybe sorry. But all she managed was a quiet. Can we talk? I nodded. What followed was not an apology. Not at first. It was awkward. Unnatural. A woman trying to stitch years back together with trembling hands. I didn't know you were still in the area, she said. I didn't know Leo was at that market. I replied. We both smiled bitterly. Tired. She looked at her son. He won't stop talking about you. He remembers the night. I asked. She nodded. All of it. She left that day without promising anything. No declarations of reunion. No erasing the past. But it was something, a crack in the wall. And that crack was about to get blown wide open. Because word was spreading. And the president wasn't the only one watching. The article hit the front page of the Sunday paper. Local officer saves child in market shooting. Nominated for Medal of Valor. My name, Isabel Ruiz, was printed in bold beneath a photo of me in uniform. Taken years ago during my academy graduation. My face was sharper back then. Smile tighter. But there it was, in black and white. Circulating not just in Millwood, but everywhere. TV anchors debated my courage. News sites called it a miracle response. Comment sections lit up with strangers praising me like I was a legend. And still, what haunted me most wasn't what the world said. It was what my family would. I found out soon enough. Marissa called 2 days before the White House ceremony. They saw the news, she said flatly. Mom, Dad, the whole church group, everyone, and I asked, unsure whether I was ready to hear it. They're processing. What does that even mean? Processing, as if the idea of me being brave was too foreign, too inconvenient. Marissa paused. They want to come to the ceremony. My stomach clenched. Not out of joy, not relief, but disbelief. They hadn't called me, not even once. They hadn't asked if I was okay, if the wound had healed, if I needed help dressing myself, if I was sleeping through the night without flinching. But now that there were headlines and cameras, now they wanted to show up. I agreed, not because I forgave them, but because I wanted them to see the truth up close and impossible to ignore. The day of the ceremony, Washington was blooming. Cherry blossoms painted the avenues with delicate color, masking the weight in my chest as we arrived at the White House. I wore my dress uniform polished shoes, ribbons in place, my Medal of Valor pinned above my heart. Danny adjusted my collar. You look like the kind of hero kids draw on notebook paper, she joked. Let's hope my parents see it that way, I muttered. And then they arrived. My parents, arm in arm, stoic, polished, dressed for a graduation, or a wedding, or a funeral, I couldn't tell which. My mother's eyes met mine, blank. My father offered a tight nod, like he was acknowledging a coworker in passing. No hugs, no tears. No, I'm proud of you. They sat 3 rows behind the president, close enough to see, far enough to hide. When the president stepped onto the stage, applause rippled through the room. He delivered a speech about sacrifice, duty, and the unseen heroism that keeps this country standing. And then he said my name, Sergeant Isabel Ruiz. Her actions placing herself between a gunman and a defenseless child were not only heroic, they were instinctual. They were human. The audience stood as I walked forward. My legs trembled, not from nerves, but from the pressure of finally being seen. The medal was draped over my uniform. Cameras flashed. Reporters scribbled, and I glanced over my shoulder. To my parents, my father had his hand over his mouth. My mother's eyes were glistening. They weren't clapping. They were stunned. And I realized, in that moment, it wasn't pride that filled their faces. It was reckoning. Because for the first time in years, they saw me not as the girl who betrayed the family, but as someone they couldn't control, couldn't dismiss, and couldn't claim credit for. I had done this without them. After the ceremony, we gathered in a side room for photographs. Politicians shook my hand. Veterans saluted. A senator asked for a quote. And then I felt a tap on my shoulder. It was my father. I didn't know, he said quietly. We didn't know. You didn't want to, I replied. Calm, firm. That's fair, he said, nodding. It's just, you're our daughter. And I always was, even when you acted like I wasn't. He winced. A man who had mastered lectures and judgments, suddenly speechless. My mother stood beside him. You look just like your abuela in uniform, she whispered. She would have been proud. I didn't respond, because the truth was I didn't need them to be proud. Not anymore. Leo ran up a few minutes later, jumping into my arms. Did you see the medal, buddy? I grinned. Yeah, everyone at school knows my aunt's a hero. Not a hero, I corrected. Just someone who did the right thing. But for him, and maybe for the country, that was enough. The headlines had faded. The ceremony was over. The cameras were gone. But the truth, the raw, inescapable truth, had followed me home like a shadow that refused to be left behind. I returned to Millwood a week later, not because I wanted to, but because Leo had begged me to visit before his birthday. Please, Aunt Izzy, I want you to cut the cake. He said it with such innocence. No politics, no trauma, just love. The kind I never got from my own parents. The town looked the same, but I didn't. Storefronts still bore faded awnings. Old men still sat on the bench outside Sam's diner talking about football and fishing. The same streetlight at 4th, and Martin still blinked out every 6 seconds. But something in the way people looked at me had changed. The whispers were different now. Not the disgusted kind that had followed me when I first joined the force, when I wore a badge instead of a cross, and chose patrols over praise. Now, they stared with a mix of awe and discomfort. A woman at the grocery store stopped me in the cereal aisle. You're the one from the news, right? That's me, I said, forcing a smile. My brother's a cop. What you did? Thank you. She hesitated, then walked away, as if she didn't know how much kindness I could handle. I didn't either. When I pulled into my sister Marissa's driveway, Leo ran out barefoot. I made you a card. It was scribbled with crayons. A cartoon of me in uniform, shield and all, standing in front of a house labeled home. I nearly cried, but I didn't, because I knew what was waiting inside. They were already at the table when I walked in. My father looked up from his glass of wine. My mother offered the kind of smile you give to someone at a funeral. And Marissa looked like she wanted to dissolve into the wall. You came, my father said, not as a welcome. More like an observation, Leo asked. I replied, silence. We sat, we ate. We pretended it was normal, until Leo, bless his clueless, beautiful heart, dropped the grenade. Grandpa, did you see Aunt Izzy's ceremony? She got a medal from the president. I froze. My mother stiffened. My father cleared his throat. Yes, he said slowly. We watched. She's famous now, Leo added. It's not about being famous, I said gently. It's about doing your job. My father put down his fork. You could have done your job in a different way, he said, not looking at me. You didn't have to put yourself in danger. That's what the job is, I said. Service, risk, purpose. You think we wanted you hurt? My mother snapped, voice cracking. We were scared. Still are. No, I said calmly. You were ashamed. That's what you were. Marissa gasped. Leo looked confused. But my parents didn't deny it. We didn't understand, my father finally said. You didn't want to understand, I replied. You wanted me to be something else? Something you could brag about. Not something you feared? You're twisting it, my mother whispered. Am I? I reached into my pocket and placed the medal on the table. This saved Leo's life. My father flinched. Your grandson's life. I know, he said, and I'm grateful. But it doesn't erase the years between us. There it was. The truth we all knew but never said. The years, the distance, the dinners missed, the birthdays avoided, the times they told the neighbors I was abroad, when I was down the street in uniform. I never wanted erasure, I said. Just respect. You have it, my father said. Now that CNN told you I deserve it. He didn't answer. Later that night, I stood alone on Marissa's porch. The sky was clear, the same stars I'd stared at during stakeouts, ambulance rides, and late-night trauma calls. But this time, I let them see me cry, not from weakness, but release. Marissa came out with tea. You okay? I will be, I said. They're trying. she whispered. Trying doesn't undo damage. No, but it's a start. I looked inside through the window. My parents were quietly talking in the living room. Not about me, not yet, but maybe one day. I don't want them to love me because I'm a hero, I said. I want them to love me because I'm me, then show them who that is. Marissa replied, I already did. It was a few weeks after Leo's birthday when the letter arrived. No stamp, no postmark, just a plain envelope slipped through the door of my apartment. It had no name on the front. Just one word in cursive handwriting I hadn't seen in years. Isabel. That alone made my hands tremble, because only one person ever called me that without shortening it to Izzy. I opened it slowly, cautiously, like it might explode in my hands. And in a way, it did. Dear Isabel, I suppose this is the letter I should have written a decade ago. But pride is a cruel filter. It turns truth into silence and regret into stubbornness. It was my father's handwriting. Precise, elegant, unmistakable. When you chose the force, I felt betrayed. I had planned your future in my head for so long. Law school, public office, maybe even a judgeship. Something clean, something that fit the Mitchell name. But you shattered that plan. Each sentence hit harder than the last. And instead of trying to understand why, I shut you out. I told myself it was love, but it wasn't. It was ego, fear. The kind that makes a man pretend his daughter doesn't exist to protect his own image. By now, my eyes were wet. But I kept reading. Then I watched you take a bullet for Leo, my grandson, my blood. And I realized something. All the things I once thought made you a disappointment, your independence, your fire, your defiance are the very things that saved his life. He wasn't poetic. He didn't try to be. But those words struck deeper than any medal or press conference could. I don't know if I deserve forgiveness, but I'm asking for the chance to start again. Not with the Isabel I imagined, but with the woman you are. The woman the president saluted. He didn't sign it, Dad. He signed it. Sincerely, Daniel Mitchell. For a while, I just sat there, the letter in one hand, my badge in the other. One was earned. The other finally offered. Later that day, I called Marissa. Did you know about the letter? I asked. He told me he was writing it, she said. Didn't think he actually would. Neither did I. So, what now? I looked at the wall across from me. Pinned to it were commendations, training certificates, photos of my squad, and that infamous White House photo. And next to it, I pinned the letter. Now, I said, I wait. He took 10 years. I can give him a little time too. That weekend, I got a call from a precinct captain in the city. They were launching a youth mentorship program pairing veteran officers with at-risk teens. We need someone the kids can look up to, he said. Someone who's been through the storm and still stands. Why me? I asked. Because they've already seen you on TV, but we want them to hear the story behind it. The blood, the battles, the backbone. I hesitated. I'd been planning to transfer, maybe even take a desk role. But something in me said, not yet. I'll do it. I said, Monday morning. I stepped into a local high school gym filled with skeptical teenage eyes. Some recognized me, others didn't care. But when I told them the first time I got beat up in middle school was because I stood up to a kid bullying a girl in the lunch line, their posture changed. When I told them my family disowned me for becoming a cop, their expressions softened. And when I told them I'd do it all again to protect someone I love, they listened. One boy came up after, couldn't have been more than 15, tough on the outside. But his voice cracked when he said, my dad's in jail. My mom says cops are the enemy. I knelt down. Sometimes the badge scares people because they've only seen it used the wrong way, I said. You get to decide what kind of man you'll be, whether you wear a badge or not. He nodded. You think I could ever do what you do? If you've got the heart, the courage, and the pain, you're already halfway there. That night, I received a text from my father. Just one line. Thank you for not tearing up the letter. I didn't reply. Not yet. But I didn't delete it either. Thanksgiving came faster than I expected. Normally, I skipped holidays. quiet takeout dinners with my squad, or volunteering for late shifts made for easy escapes. But this year, my mother called. Just dinner, she said. No speeches, no drama, no expectations. I hesitated. Dad will be there. Yes, Leo. Of course. He asks about you more than anyone. Something in her voice cracked at the end. Not weakness. Maybe hope. I said yes, and instantly regretted it. That Thursday, I wore civilian clothes. I didn't want my uniform to speak louder than I did. As I pulled into the driveway of my childhood home, where the front lawn was still perfectly trimmed and the wreath on the door was seasonal perfection, I nearly turned the car around. But Leo answered the door. Aunt Izzy, he yelled, hugging me so tight I thought I might actually cry on the spot. I saved you a seat next to me. He dragged me in like nothing had ever happened between his parents and me. And maybe, in his world, it hadn't. The table was set like a magazine spread. My mother wore her usual pearls. My father had his usual silence. My sister, well, Marissa kept the small talk alive. I tried. I really did. This turkey's great, I offered. Dad made it, Marissa said, nudging him. He looked at me, fork in hand. Just followed a recipe. It wasn't warm, but it wasn't cruel either. Baby steps. Halfway through the meal, Leo, bless his chaos, stood on his chair. Can I say something? We all nodded. Amused. I'm thankful Aunt Izzy didn't die, because then I wouldn't have my superhero anymore. He beamed. Marissa smiled softly. My mother blinked back tears. My father stared at his plate. Then something strange happened. He set down his fork, wiped his mouth with a napkin, and cleared his throat. I'd like to say something too. The room fell quiet. Isabel, he began, using my full name again. You know I've never been good at this. Talking, feeling, apologizing. But watching you risk your life for my grandson, knowing you would have done the same for any child, it undid me. My mother's hand found her glass but didn't lift it. I spent years building an idea of what you were supposed to be. And when you chose your own path, I took it as betrayal. But now, I see, you didn't betray us. You became more than we ever imagined. I couldn't breathe. This man, who hadn't hugged me in a decade, was breaking apart in front of a linen tablecloth and cranberry sauce. So I want to say I'm sorry. For the silence, for the dismissal, for the pride that kept me from seeing you clearly. And if you're willing, I'd like to be part of your life again. There was no applause, just silence, thick, reverent, and raw. Leo broke it with a giggle and a loud, "That means you're undisowned." Everyone laughed through their tears, even me. Later, after dessert and too many hugs from my mom, I stepped outside. My father joined me a moment later. He didn't speak at first, just stood next to me, both of us watching the stars like we used to when I was a girl with scraped knees and too many questions. The day the president said your name, he murmured, was the day I realized I'd missed knowing someone truly remarkable. I looked over at him, the old professor with shoulders heavier than his years. It's not too late, I said, but you'll have to keep up. He chuckled. I've got good walking shoes. Before I left, he handed me a small box. Inside was a polished badge from his time as a legal advisor to the mayor decades ago. It's not an officer's badge, he said, but I kept it to remind me that justice looks different for everyone. Now, it belongs with someone who lives it. I drove home that night, the badge beside me, the apology still ringing in my ears. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. And that's where healing begins. 3 months after Thanksgiving, life had settled into something almost normal. I was back on duty. My legs still ached some mornings, but my partner, Officer Ramirez, made sure I didn't limp too obviously in front of rookies. My father had called twice just to chat. My mother sent me soup recipes. And Marissa started inviting me to Leo's school plays like it had never been different. I wasn't naive enough to think things were fully healed, but it was enough until the knock came. It was a quiet Tuesday at the precinct, rain tapping lightly on the windows. I was finishing paperwork when Sergeant Blake stuck his head into the office. Hey Mitchell, you've got visitors. Who? Didn't say. But it's kind of a situation. That made me pause. I stepped into the lobby and froze. Standing under the fluorescent lights were two men I hadn't seen in years. Tommy and Darren Lewis, my childhood neighbors. We'd shared bikes, video games, and treehouse secrets before high school pulled us in different directions, and then pulled them into a world I refused to follow: gangs, drugs, and, eventually, the wrong side of the law. The last I heard, Darren had done time. Tommy had vanished. Now they stood there soaked, pale, and jittery. Darren looked me in the eye first. "Izzy, we need your help." Every cop has that one moment. The one where the badge feels like both a shield and a noose. I looked at the two boys who once threw snowballs at my window, and now looked like men haunted by too many ghosts. "You've got 60 seconds, I said, arms crossed. Tommy stepped forward. "It's my daughter, Kaylee. She's gone. I think she was taken." My breath caught. Taken. Like kidnapped. Like vanished. No ransom. No trace. Just gone. "And you didn't go to missing persons because I have a record," he snapped. "And because Kaylee's mom, she's with some guys I don't trust." This wasn't just personal. This was dangerous. Darren looked down. "We messed up, Izzy, a lot. But Kaylee's innocent, and if you won't help for us, help for her." The room spun. Every protocol screamed report and refer. But my gut, my worn, overused, too often correct gut whispered something else. "You got any idea where she might be?" "A warehouse. Near the docks. Abandoned shipping depot." Of course it was. I went to Blake, told him everything. Expected a lecture. Instead, he just nodded slowly. "We'll do this by the book, but I trust your judgment. Suit up." Ramirez raised an eyebrow. "You sure this isn't personal?" "It is," I said. "But it's also right." That night, we moved in. Ramirez and I in the lead, SWAT on standby, and patrol on perimeter. The warehouse was quiet. Too quiet. We found Kaylee, chained to a metal pipe, barely conscious, but alive. We also found 5 men armed and ready to run a trafficking ring that reached 3 states. Tommy hadn't been paranoid. He'd been desperate. And for once, he'd chosen to run to the right person. After the dust settled, the arrests were processed, and Kaylee was safely taken to the hospital. I stepped outside. Darren sat on the curb, shaking. "I never thought you'd help," he said. "I never thought you'd ask," I replied. "Does this mean we're good?" I thought about that. "It means I don't forget who you were. But I also see who you tried to be today." The next morning, my name was in the paper. Not for medals, not for speeches. Just a line in a report. "Officer Isabel Mitchell assisted in the rescue of a minor from an attempted trafficking operation." No headlines. No press conference. Just the job. But that night, I got a call. "Isabel," my father said. "I saw the article. You okay?" "I am." Silence. "Then, when you were 10, I used to think you'd be a lawyer. Like me." "I know. But watching you now, I'm glad you're not." I smiled. "Me too." 2 weeks after the rescue at the docks, life began returning to its quiet hum. Calls, patrols, reports, repeat. But then I got the envelope. Thick, cream-colored, embossed seal. "Office of the Mayor, City of Brighton." I raised an eyebrow. My precinct hadn't received a mayoral visit in years, much less a personalized letter. Inside was a formal invitation. "Officer Isabel Mitchell, in recognition of your courageous service in the rescue and recovery of minor Kaylee Lewis and your consistent display of valor under pressure, the Office of the Mayor cordially invites you to attend the annual Civic Heroism Gala as a guest of honor." I stared at it for several minutes. Ramirez peeked over my shoulder. "About damn time someone noticed." The gala was held at the Brighton Municipal Hall marble floors, chandeliers, the whole deal. I rented a dress, a black one, simple, elegant, like armor made from silk. When I walked through the doors, I didn't recognize the room, not the officers in formal dress uniforms, not the smiling community leaders, and certainly not the woman who approached me with a glass of champagne and said, "You're the one who pulled that little girl from the warehouse, right?" "That's me," I said carefully. Thank you, she said, eyes misting. My niece goes to school with Kaylee. We were all terrified. I was halfway through my second canapé when I heard it. Officer Isabel Mitchell. The mayor's voice boomed from the podium. Everyone turned. Brighton has had many brave officers, but few have faced the danger Officer Mitchell did alone, outnumbered, and under threat, and still walked forward. Applause echoed across the hall. Tonight, we recognize courage, but we also recognize the quiet kind, the kind that doesn't always make headlines, the kind that happens in alleyways, behind precinct walls, in abandoned warehouses, the kind that saves lives. He gestured for me to come forward. As I approached the stage, cameras flashed. People clapped. I wasn't used to it, at all. When I stood next to the mayor, he handed me a plaque and whispered, "The girl's safe because you didn't wait." That takes guts. I took the mic, hands shaking slightly. I'm not used to speeches. I began, "So I'll just say this. I became a cop because I wanted to protect people who couldn't always protect themselves. It wasn't about headlines. It was about showing up. And I'm grateful that tonight, you've all shown up for that kind of work." Applause again. Louder this time. Afterward, I mingled, uncomfortable, unsure what to say. Then I heard a voice behind me. "You clean up well." I turned. My mother, in a dark blue dress, standing stiffly beside my father. "We got the invitation through the mayor's office," he explained. "We didn't want to intrude. But we're proud of you," she said. I blinked. "You are?" "Yes," and ashamed that it took a plaque for us to say it. We stepped outside for air. The night was crisp, stars above us, the faint buzz of music drifting through open doors. "You once told me I'd never make anything of myself," I said softly. My dad winced. "I was wrong." Silence. Then, "You saved someone's daughter," my mom added. "That matters. Every day. You matter." I didn't cry. Not in the dress. Not in front of all those dignitaries. But inside, something shifted. A lifelong ache loosened its grip on my chest. They offered to walk me to my car. I accepted. We stood by the door a moment too long. Then my father said, "We'd like to come visit sometime." "If that's okay." I nodded. "Start with coffee," I said. "Then we'll talk about dinner." We laughed. Awkwardly, but together. For a while. It felt like I had stepped into someone else's life. My parents were calling not often, but enough. I was invited to Sunday dinners again. My mom had even started introducing me to her friends with a proud little smile. "That's our daughter, Isabel." A police officer, it should have felt satisfying. And it did for a moment. But peace, like patrol shifts, never lasted long. It was a rainy Tuesday when I got the call. "Officer down." 2 words that twist your gut instantly. Location: 6th and Alder. Armed robbery in progress. Backup en route. I flipped the siren on before dispatch finished the sentence. When I got there, the scene was chaos. A convenience store window shattered, blood on the ground, and one officer pinned behind the squad car, my partner, Ramirez. "Sniper, 2nd floor. Corner window," he hissed, ducking down. "You're hit." He nodded. "Shoulder wound. Deep, but not fatal. He's got a hostage inside." "Store clerk. Young guy." I scanned the building. Too many angles. Too few minutes. Every second we waited, that kid inside got closer to never walking out again. I radioed for SWAT. 10 minutes out. Too long. "Cover me!" Ramirez blinked. "You're not seriously... I'm not letting that kid die because someone's playing cowboy with a rifle." He nodded. 1, 2, 3. I sprinted. Bullets cracked past me like angry insects. Glass shattered as I crashed through the side door of the store. I moved low and fast, heart hammering. Inside, the kid was tied to a shelf near the counter, face pale, eyes wide. The shooter was upstairs, but he'd rigged the door with a tripwire and mirror setup. He'd been ready for a takedown, but not for me to come through the side. I cut the clerk loose. "You okay?" He nodded rapidly, tears streaking down his cheek. I pulled him close. "On my count, we're running." We made it 3 feet before a shot rang out from above. Pain exploded through my side. We both collapsed behind the counter. I felt blood warm, sticky soaking into my vest and shirt. But I stayed awake, stayed focused. "You're gonna be okay," I whispered to the kid. "Just keep breathing." Over the radio, I heard Ramirez's voice, tight with panic. "Officer down." I repeat, "Officer Mitchell's been hit." Inside the structure, sirens blared outside. Then the thunder of boots. SWAT had arrived. They stormed in from the front, precise and lethal. The shooter was neutralized in seconds. But the world around me was already tilting. In the ambulance, I drifted in and out, flashing lights above. Paramedics talking too fast. BP dropping. "Keep pressure. She's still responsive. We're losing her move." I wasn't scared. I was tired. Bone-deep tired. But even through the haze, I had one thought. Please don't let that kid die. I woke up in the hospital 2 days later, IV in my arm, bandages around my side, and a wall of flowers beside my bed. Ramirez sat in the chair next to me, sipping terrible coffee. "Took you long enough. Is the kid okay?" He smiled. "Thanks to you." I let the breath I didn't know I was holding slip out. Later that night, the door creaked open. My parents walked in slow, unsure. My mom carried a small duffel. My dad held a single white rose. Neither spoke for a moment. Then she said, "I packed some things. Thought you might be here a while? We should have been here sooner." My dad added. I didn't answer right away. I just nodded, because forgiveness doesn't come all at once. It comes in these small, quiet choices to let someone show up, even if they didn't before, to let them carry your grief, even if they once handed it to you. That night, they stayed until I fell asleep. My mother reading silently in the corner, my father watching the heart monitor beep. And I realized even broken families can learn to mend, not all at once, but stitch by painful stitch. 2 weeks passed before I was cleared to leave the hospital. I still walked with a limp, and my side felt like it had been set on fire by lightning, but I was alive. Alive, and suddenly, visible. I don't know how the story leaked, maybe from a medic, maybe the SWAT team, but it hit the local news within 48 hours. Officer risks life to save teen hostage during armed standoff. Then it spread. National outlets picked it up. Cable news anchors replayed the footage. They called me brave. They called me hero. They said my name with reverence, the same name my parents once refused to mention at dinner. One morning, I woke up to over 3 new messages, half from strangers. "You saved my cousin, thank you. My brother's a cop. You're what's right with this country." And the other half from media outlets. "Interview request. Can we do a feature? Would you appear on our morning segment?" It was overwhelming. But the moment that truly hit me was when I opened a handwritten letter with the presidential seal. I thought it was a joke until I read the ink. "To Officer Isabel Mitchell, your courage in the line of duty is an example of the very best our country has to offer. You placed yourself in danger to protect a life, and in doing so, reminded us of what public service truly means." The President of the United States. 2 days later, my precinct captain called me into his office. "You've been selected for the Medal of Valor." I blinked. "Is that?" He nodded. "Highest honor a civilian officer can receive. You'll be flown out to D.C. next month. White House ceremony. The president wants to present it himself." I sat there in stunned silence, the weight of everything crashing in like waves. They disowned me. Then I wore the badge they mocked. And now the same badge would be handed back to me by the president. When I told my parents, there was a long silence on the phone. "That's incredible," my mom finally said. "We'll be there," Dad added quietly. And for the first time, I believed him. The White House ceremony was surreal. Flags, marble floors, security everywhere. I stood among other honorees, first responders, firefighters, a paramedic who'd pulled a child from a burning building. We were all quiet, waiting. Then the doors opened, and the president walked in. Cameras flashed. He gave a short speech, gracious, powerful. Then he read each name. "Officer Isabel Mitchell, for extraordinary bravery and selfless service during a live hostage situation, where she shielded and extracted a civilian while under active sniper fire." I walked forward. The president looked me in the eye and shook my hand. "You did more than save a life," he said. "You reminded people that duty still means something." He pinned the Medal of Valor on my chest. The room applauded, but I only looked at two people in the crowd. My parents. They were standing. My father's eyes were glassy. My mother held her hand over her mouth, trying not to cry. In that moment they saw me. Not the disappointment, not the dropout, not the cop, but their daughter. After the ceremony, we gathered for photos. Reporters hovered, asking questions. And when someone asked, "How did your family feel when you joined the force?" I looked right at the camera and smiled. They had concerns, I said carefully. But today, I think they're proud. Behind me, my father nodded. That night, as we sat in the hotel lounge, my dad slid a small box across the table. Inside, a patch, framed in glass. "It was your grandfather's," he said. NYPD. 1965. "We never told you he was a beat cop before law school." I stared at it, shocked. Why not? Because we thought it wasn't good enough. We were wrong. My mother reached for my hand. "I'm sorry," she said. "We let our fear of judgment make us blind to your strength." I didn't know what to say. I just nodded. Because some apologies don't need words back. They need time. And this was a start. That medal didn't change who I was, but it changed who the world saw me as. And for the first time, I felt the difference between being tolerated and being honored, between being invisible and finally seen. 6 weeks after the ceremony, I was back in uniform, same precinct, same streets, same worn-down desk in the corner of the squad room. But everything had changed. People nodded now when I passed. Veteran officers who once barely looked my way now offered warm smiles or quiet respect. Even the lieutenant who once said, "You're too green for this job," now greeted me with a thumbs up. The city was the same, loud, chaotic, alive, but somehow I stood inside it differently, grounded, seen. I took the night shift again, by choice. It's where the real work happens, the raw, unfiltered calls that most don't want. Domestic disputes, runaway teens, drug overdoses, desperation in its purest form. But I'd learned something from bleeding on a living room floor. Sometimes you save a life not with bullets or body armor, but just by showing up, by not flinching, by listening. One night, I responded to a 911 call from a townhouse in the Upper East Side, suspected break-in. The dispatcher's voice was calm, but something in her tone felt off. "Caller's a minor. Says he's hiding upstairs." I arrived in under 4 minutes. Back up 2 minutes behind. Door unlocked. Lights flickering inside. I stepped in cautiously, announcing myself. "NYPD. Anyone here?" From the top of the staircase came a whisper. "Here. Please don't go." I followed it slowly, hand hovering near my sidearm, eyes scanning. In a bedroom closet, I found a boy 13, maybe 14, shaking. His nose was bleeding, one eye swollen. He looked familiar, very familiar. "Are you hurt anywhere else?" I asked gently. He nodded. "I think my arm's broken." As I helped him out, he suddenly whispered, "You saved me once before." I froze. "What do you mean?" He pointed to a photo frame on the hallway table, and my breath caught. It was their house, the family from the hostage standoff. The boy, their son, the same one I dragged across the hallway while bleeding out beside him. I hadn't recognized him at first. He was taller now, older, changed by trauma just like me. "My parents said you were a hero," he said quietly. "But they never said thank you." My heart pounded. He hadn't called 911 because of a break-in. He'd called because his parents were fighting downstairs again. His mom screaming, his dad slurring his words. The same people who once begged me to save him couldn't save themselves. I waited with him until child services arrived. His aunt came to take him for the night. Before he left, he hugged me tightly. "You're still my hero," he whispered. "No matter what they forget." And just like that, he was gone. That night, I didn't cry. I just sat in my patrol car under a flickering streetlight and stared ahead. The truth of what I had chosen hit me like a wave. This wasn't about medals. It wasn't about my parents. It wasn't even about proving anything anymore. It was about showing up when no one else would. It was about being there. Back at the station, I found a small envelope in my locker. No name. Inside was a folded note. For the one who stood in front of the bullet. From someone who finally saw what courage looks like. I recognized my father's handwriting. My chest tightened. No signature. No explanation. But for once, he didn't need to say it. He had seen me, not the uniform. Not the job me. It didn't erase the years of silence. But it opened something, a door. And this time, I wasn't the one knocking. Thanksgiving came colder than usual that year. The precinct was running low on officers. And I had signed up for the holiday shift again, not because I had to, but because I preferred the silence. Or at least, the predictable chaos of the streets. Empty homes, filled with voices arguing over politics, dry turkey, and broken traditions. I'd lived that once. I didn't need to repeat it. That morning, I dropped off a few donated blankets at a women's shelter on 113th. I handed out coffee to a homeless veteran named Leo who called me Sarge, even though I wasn't one. I laughed more than I thought I would. And then, just after 3 p.m., I got a text from an unknown number. Isabel, dinner is at 6. If you'd like to come. Mom. No punctuation, no apologies. Just a time. But somehow, that message felt louder than any "I'm sorry" ever could. I stood outside their brownstone at 5:59 p.m., in uniform. No flowers. No grand speech prepared. Just my badge, my breath, my memories. I knocked once. The door opened slowly. There stood my mother, in her apron, eyes red from cooking or crying. I wasn't sure. "You're early," she said. "You're late," I replied softly. And then we both smiled faintly. But for real, inside, the house was the same. Framed academic degrees on the wall, polished furniture, piano untouched. But the energy was different, quieter, not tense, not welcoming either, just cautious. Like everyone was waiting to see what version of me would walk through that door. My father rose when I entered. He looked older, thinner. His tie was slightly crooked, something I'd never seen before. "Thank you for coming," he said. His voice trembled slightly. "I almost didn't," I replied, taking off my coat. But then I remembered something someone once said to me in a hospital hallway. He waited. "Family doesn't get to choose whether they're proud. They just get to show up." He nodded once, swallowing hard. Then did something I hadn't expected. He pulled out a chair for me at the table. My brother Julian was already seated, carving the turkey. He looked up, unsure whether to joke or apologize. Instead, he simply said, "I told Leo you'd be here." Leo was their son, the boy I saved. He wasn't there tonight. He was spending the day with his aunt in Jersey. But apparently, he still talked about me. "He says you're like Captain America," Julian added with a grin. I laughed, really laughed, for the first time in a long while. "Tell him I'm shorter." The dinner itself was awkward, then warm, then strangely normal. We talked about precinct politics, then about Julian's new promotion at the firm. We skipped the war stories and the wounds. But as dessert was served, my mother quietly placed something on the table near me. A small black frame. Inside it, a photograph of me in uniform. And beside it, a newspaper clipping of the rescue, laminated. "We've been keeping this," she said. "Didn't know how to show it." "You just did," I whispered. After dessert, while washing dishes, my father joined me at the sink. He dried in silence for a moment before speaking. "I always thought courage was academic. That bravery was restraint, logic, discipline. Turns out," he said, glancing at the long scar on my arm, "it sometimes bleeds." That moment didn't fix years of distance, but it patched something. Enough to hold, at least. As I left that night, my mom handed me a box. "It's from your grandfather," she said. "We kept it, in case you ever came home." Inside, his old police badge, and a letter. "To the next Ruiz who wears a badge, not because you have to, but because your heart leaves you no other choice." I held it tightly as I walked back to my cruiser. The street was quiet, light soft through the trees. No headlines, no applause, but my heart, it was full. Not from their acceptance, but because I had finally accepted myself. 5 years had passed. 5 promotions, 2 surgeries, countless arrests, and one broken engagement I still didn't talk about. But that winter, I stood in front of a class of cadets at the police academy. I had traded my beat cop uniform for a tailored instructor's jacket, still had the scar, still carried the limp. But this time, they called me Lieutenant Ruiz. I wasn't supposed to be there that morning. It was my day off. But a young woman had requested me personally for her badge pinning ceremony. Her name was Alyssa Jordan, one of my best students. Tough, sharp, too much heart for her own good. I saw myself in her, not the wounds, but the hunger. When I arrived, she was standing tall at the front of the room, surrounded by family. Her mother sobbed softly in the second row. Her father, a veteran, nodded proudly. As I approached to pin her badge, she whispered, "I never thought I'd make it. I almost dropped out after the academy shooting. But you made me believe I belonged." "No," I replied, voice steady. "You made me believe this job still matters." And with that, I passed her my grandfather's badge, the same one my mother had given me years ago. Later that night, I visited his grave. The snow was fresh, untouched, like a clean page. I placed a single white rose beside the headstone and whispered, "We made it, Grandpa." And I didn't just carry your badge. I passed it on. Back at home, I found an email waiting from Julian. It read, "Leo's class is doing Hero Day next week. He wants you to come, if you're free." That is, my hands trembled, but not from fear, just gratitude. "Tell him I'll bring the donuts, Aunt Izzy." That Friday, I stood in front of 20 bright-eyed third graders, holding up my badge. "Who here wants to protect their community one day?" I asked. 20 tiny hands shot up, including Leo's. Afterward, he ran up to me and hugged me tight. "You're my hero," he whispered. "Nah," I smiled. "I'm just your backup." As I walked to my car, a familiar ringtone played. "My mom, we're having dinner next weekend. No pressure, but we'd love to have you." "Thanks, Mom," I said, smiling. "I'll bring the mashed potatoes and maybe wear the uniform," she asked sheepishly. "Only if Dad doesn't critique the hemline again." We both laughed. I hung up and sat in my cruiser a moment longer, looking at my reflection in the rearview mirror. Same eyes, same woman. But something had changed. I no longer needed their approval. I had earned my own. And through all the rejection, the wounds, the silence, I had found a deeper truth. You don't become family just by blood. You become it by showing up, again and again, even when they don't clap, especially when they don't clap. Do you think she forgave too easily, or was it finally time? If this happened to you, would you have gone to dinner? Subscribe for more stories where silence speaks louder than words.